Come with me." The older girl and the not-so-younger girl walked into Xiao Qinghan's room one after another. Lin Xingyi looked around cautiously, like a small animal adapting to a new environment. Xiao Qinghan's room is decorated simply and warmly, with several healing watercolor paintings hanging on the wall. Xiao Qinghan sat beside the bed and asked softly, "Xingyi, let's do some additional psychological therapy, although it's not in the clinic. I think the current atmosphere may be more suitable for you to relax." Xiao Qinghan felt that 3,000 yuan for an hour was a bit too much, so he decided to take advantage of the time now. Lin Xingyi was stunned for a moment, with a hint of surprise and hesitation in her eyes. She lowered her head, and her long eyelashes cast a small shadow on her face. Seeing this, Xiao Qinghan added gently, "Don't feel pressured. Just think of it as a chat." Lin Xingyi raised her head. Over this period of time, she had quietly built up trust in Xiao Qinghan. She nodded slightly, her voice trembling slightly. Okay, Sister Qinghan." Xiao Qinghan showed a relieved smile. "So, did you take the sketchbook? We agreed that if I have something on my mind, I can draw it in that book." Lin Xingyi's body stiffened slightly, and a trace of panic flashed in her eyes. His fingers unconsciously grasped the corner of his clothes. And after hesitating for a few seconds, he finally nodded gently. "Yes, I brought it." Lin Xingyi walked towards her suitcase, her movements so gentle as if she was performing some sacred ritual. Taking a deep breath, he carefully unzipped his clothes, as if he were opening Pandora's box. The tender little white hand reached into the suitcase, fumbled for a while, and finally touched the familiar sketchbook. Lin Xingyi's fingertips trembled slightly. She gently stroked the spine of the book, as if she was touching the deepest secret in her heart. Slowly she pulled out the sketchbook, held it to her chest, and turned to face Xiao Qinghan. A faint blush appeared on Lin Xingyi's face, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of nervousness, trust and a hint of anticipation. Here you are, Sister Qinghan," she said softly, handing over the sketchbook. Xiao Qinghan took the sketchbook with a warm smile on his face. But it was not the professional smile he wore when he was wearing a white coat. "Thank you for trusting me, Xingyi." Xiao Qinghan took the sketchbook, flipped through the last few pages, and his eyes suddenly lit up. There was a sly smile on the corner of his mouth, and some mischievous light flashed in his eyes. "Oh, is this a picture of our Yang Yang?" Xiao Qinghan asked with a smile, a hint of amusement in his voice. "If you are not wearing a white coat and are not at work, you can be more casual." The tips of Lin Xingyi's ears were stained pink. Her face was like a ripe apple, her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and she whispered, Yeah." Xiao Qinghan looked at Lin Xingyi's shy look and couldn't help laughing out loud, but sighed in his heart. Chen Yang is an adult and should be responsible for his own actions. Let's not worry about him about this part. Xiao Qinghan took off his usual mask of a psychologist, put on soft pajamas, and sat cross-legged on the bed. At this moment, she is more like an older sister who loves to gossip. "Don't be shy." Xiao Qinghan gently patted Lin Xingyi's shoulder. "Come on, tell your sister, are you in love with our Yang Yang?" Lin Xingyi raised her head, the look in her foxy eyes was a little complicated. After hesitating for a moment, she nodded slightly without denying. After receiving this reply, Xiao Qinghan was worried about Chen Yang in his heart. He pointed to this page and said in a gentle tone, "Let's start from here then." Chapter 60 for convertible three-wheeled sports car. In the next tower, Xiao Qinghan provided interpersonal psychotherapy for Lin Xingyi. The guiding voice at the beginning was gentle but firm, like a ray of warm sunshine, slowly melting the ice that had already melted in Lin Xingyi's heart. "Xingyi, everyone is a unique individual, and has the right to be loved and to love others," Xiao Qinghan said softly. "Your depression does not define who you are. It is simply a challenge in your life's journey." Lin Xingyi listened quietly and nodded. Xiao Qinghan continued, "The Chen Yang in your painting has such a bright smile. This means that in your heart, he is a sunny and warm person. Have you ever thought that maybe in his eyes, you are also such a special person?" Lin Xingyi shook her head slightly, a hint of uncertainty on her face. "Don't deny your own worth, Starry Sky," Xiao Qinghan said gently but firmly. "You are unique and worthy of being loved. Let's work together to slowly open your heart. Okay?" Lin Xingyi's delicate eyes were moistened, and she nodded gently, her voice choking. Time passed quietly, and when the treatment ended, it was almost late at night. Xiao Qinghan looked at his watch. "Time for bed, Star Ripple." Xiao Qinghan didn't have the habit of leaving a light on at night, so he turned off the light. The two of them lay side by side on the bed, slowly getting used to the darkness. Xiao Qinghan suddenly asked, "Xingyi, do you mind if I hold you while sleeping?" Lin Xingyi was stunned for a moment. Her face flushed slightly in the darkness, and she answered softly, "No, I don't mind." The voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz, with a hint of panic. Lin Xingyi had never been held in her arms while sleeping, and even when she was a child she had no such impression of her mother. Xiao Qinghan smiled, stretched out his hand and held Lin Xingyi in his arms. Feeling the warmth of the little girl in my arms, a wonderful feeling arose in my heart. It's great, Xiao Qinghan thought, holding such a cute girl. I feel younger. Lin Xingyi's body was slightly stiff, but she quickly relaxed in Xiao Qian's warm embrace. The room was not hot even though the air conditioner was on. It is better to say that it is best to sleep with the air conditioner on and a quilt covering you. The girl exuded a faint fragrance, like a flower in early spring. Xiao Qinghan couldn't help but rubbed Lin Xingyi's hair and said softly, "Xingyi, you smell so good." Lin Xingyi's face turned even redder, but she didn't avoid it. On the contrary, she adjusted her posture slightly to make herself more comfortably nestled in Xiao Qinghan's arms. In Xiao Qinghan's room, the two girls slept in each other's arms. Lin Xingyi's cheek was pressed against Xiao Qinghan's shoulder, and her warm breath gently brushed Xiao Qinghan's neck. The moonlight shines through the gaps in the curtains, casting a soft silver glow on this warm picture. In the dead of night, in the Chen family's large house, two completely different scenes were playing out into different rooms. In the next room, Chen Yang was lying on the bed alone, staring at the ceiling. Suddenly, Chen Yang seemed to remember something and sat up abruptly. I reached out and groped for the phone on the bedside table. My fingertips gently slid across the screen, and the unlocking sound was particularly clear in the silent night. Chen Yang opened the chat interface with Lin Xingyi, hesitated for a moment, and began to type. "Xingyi, how about I take you to the morning market tomorrow?" His finger lingered on the send button for a few seconds, and finally he tapped it lightly. After sending the message, Chen Yang recalled the embarrassing scene when he promised Lin Xingyi to get up early, but ended up sleeping until noon. His face couldn't help but get hot. He slapped his forehead in annoyance and sent another message. "I promise, I will really get up early this time." After sending the message, Chen Yang put the phone back on the bedside table and lay down again. The next morning, the sunlight gently poured into the room, coating every corner with a layer of gold. Chen Yang opened his eyes and looked at his phone. Fortunately, he didn't oversleep. I got up quietly, afraid to wake others. At the same time, Lin Xingyi also woke up. She carefully moved out of Xiao Qinghan's arms, fearing to disturb Xiao Qinghan, who was still sleeping. Lin Xingyi sat up, turned her head slightly, and looked at Xiao Qinghan's sleeping face. A little sunlight came through the curtains, casting mottled light and shadows on Xiao Qinghan's face, making her look particularly soft. The long eyelashes cast a small shadow on the face, and the slightly open lips seemed to be whispering something. Looking at the sleeping Xiao Qinghan, Lin Xingyi couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. She got out of bed quietly, put on her clothes quietly, and then left the room quietly. After washing up, Lin Xingyi ran into Chen Yang head-on in the corridor. The two looked at each other and were stunned for a moment. "Good morning, Xingyi," Chen Yang said softly, with a gleam of joy in his eyes. "Are you ready for the morning market?" Lin Xingyi nodded, still a little sleepy on her face, not fully awake. "Yeah, I'm ready." The two went downstairs, and Chen Yang took a bunch of keys from the main room and waved them in front of Lin Xingyi. "Are you ready for a roadster ride?" Lin Xingyi tilted her head in confusion, not understanding what Chen Yang meant by convertible sports car. There were some cars nearby, most of which were similar to the white Volkswagen that Chen Yang drove, but no sports cars were seen. Chen Yang led Lin Xingyi to the yard and pointed at a uniquely shaped car. "Look, this is our car today. The convertible sports car. In front of us is actually an electric tricycle. The body is light blue with a small driver's seat in the front and only one seat. At the back is a spacious open cargo box with iron rails on both sides that are less than knee-high. The entire car body looks strong and durable, with a simple metallic luster in the sun. Is this a convertible sports car?" Lin Xingyi looked at the electric tricycle and couldn't help laughing out loud. Chen Yang nodded solemnly. "Yes, this is a specially customized convertible sports car for the countryside. How about it, isn't it cool?" Chen Yang walked to the tricycle and patted it gently. "Come, I'll help you up." Chen Yang stretched out his hand and held Lin Xingyi's arm, which felt very good. Lin Xingyi gently placed her hand on Chen Yang's palm, took a big step onto the open cargo box, looked around nervously, and held the railing tightly with both hands. "Don't be afraid." Chen Yang's tone was gentle. "I'll drive very steadily." Chen Yang climbed into the driver's seat, inserted the key, and started the car. The motor made a slight humming sound, and the tricycle slowly drove out of the yard and headed towards the town. The morning breeze caressed her face, and the not-too-hot sunshine shone on her body. Lin Xingyi gradually relaxed. This open carriage worked surprisingly well for cruising. How was it? Was it more enjoyable than you imagined? Chen Yang, who was driving a three-wheeler in front, asked proudly. Lin Xingyi spoke with a smile, enjoying the feeling of the country breeze. Yeah, it's really great. As she spoke, she mustered her courage. Slowly moved forward, and carefully leaned out with her head just behind Xin Yang's left. Looking at the panoramic scenery. Her long hair was blown by the wind, and a few strands gently brushed Chen Yang's neck, turned into a long straight path with trees on both sides, and the end of the path seems to be as far as the eye can see. Chen Yang accelerated and the wind in his face became cooler, just like the breathing of a tree. Hold on tight, we'll be there soon. Chapter 65 Early Set. In just a few minutes, the lively scene spread from far away to near. At dawn, the town's market is already bustling with activity. Various hawking sounds can be heard one after another, and the air is filled with the aroma of fresh fruits and vegetables and scones. The vendors were busy displaying their wares, and folks from several nearby villages were walking around, with the sounds of bargaining audible all the way. The aisle was not very wide, and Chen Yang drove the tricycle slowly, taking Lin Xingyi through it. Actually, there was nothing I wanted to buy, I just wanted to take Lin Xingyi for a walk. Seeing the girl's curious look, he felt that this trip to the morning market was worthwhile. Chen Yang, what is that? Lin Xingyi pointed at a stall and asked, with curiosity gleaming in her eyes. Chen Yang looked in the direction of her finger and explained with a smile. That's a sugar painting, made with syrup. It can be made into various shapes. It's beautiful and delicious. Strange, this is usually sold at night. How come it's available during the day? Do you want to eat? Lin Xingyi shook her head. No, I'm just a little curious. Driving slowly, Chen Yang's eyes were attracted by a stall selling clothes. He parked the tricycle on the side of the road, jumped out, picked up a pure white short-sleeved shirt, and looked at it carefully. Lin Xingyi slowly took out her white sneakers, put one foot firmly on the ground, then jumped carefully and got off the tricycle. White work is like consumables. You will never have enough of them. Boss, how much is this dress? Chen Yang touched the fabric, his tone casual, but with a hint of tentativeness. The boss is a middle-aged man with a warm attitude. Good vision, young man. This is the latest model this year, made of good materials and fine workmanship. 30 for 1, 50 for 2, 75 for 3, absolutely cheap. After listening to this, Chen Yang frowned slightly, and looked thoughtful, nodded, then shook his head gently. Boss, your price is a bit high. I think this material can be sold for 20 yuan at most. The boss immediately retorted. Oh boy, you are out of your league. This is pure cotton, very comfortable to wear, how can it be 20? I buy it for more than this price. Chen Yang was not in a hurry, stroking the stubble that had grown back after shaving 2 weeks ago. Boss, I understand, but look. Instead of leaving the goods unused, why not sell them early and recover your funds? You can still make money if you sell it at a lower price. Right? The boss still insisted, but seemed to be a little shaken. This can't be too cheap. Seeing this, Chen Yang knew there was hope and immediately increased his bet. How about this? I've got 3 items I like. If you give me a discount, I'll buy them all now. You must be standing here so early in the morning. You must be so tired. The boss thought for a moment. Okay, you are a good talker. 3 pieces for 65, no less. Chen Yang showed an embarrassed expression and shook his head. Boss, 65 is still too high. I'm a student, and my living expenses this month are not enough. How about this, 3 for 40? I'll pay and take them away right away. And I'll come back to buy from you in the future. Just think about it. It's auspicious to close a deal so early. Lin Xingyi stood behind Chen Yang, smoothing the hair beside her ears with her slender fingers, and was a little puzzled as to why the price could be negotiated. The boss was so amused by what Chen Yang said. You are really good at bargaining, young man. Okay, since you are the first customer today, I will sell it to you for 40, but you have to come often. Chen Yang smiled and nodded. It's a deal. After saying that, he immediately used WeChat to scan a small green card next to him and paid 40. Lin Xingyi tilted her head thoughtfully. She had never seen such a scene since she was a child. When buying things, she just paid for what she liked. Why did she need such a complicated process? Putting myself in his shoes, I realized how difficult it would be to do this myself. I would definitely feel embarrassed to bargain after the boss mentioned the price. So this thing is difficult. After thinking for a while, I couldn't help but feel an inexplicable admiration in my heart. So awesome. Chen Yang held the clothes and looked at Lin Xingyi, who was standing there, his fingers still curling the ends of her soft hair, not knowing what she was daydreaming about. Let's go. Lin Xingyi came back to her senses and nodded. Well, you're amazing. This is the first time I've seen someone buy something like this. Chen Yang had no choice but to laugh it off and help Lin Xingyi into the car. This feeling is like a junior high school student doing elementary school problems and being told how great he is by elementary school students. It's really cool, but it feels weird. Continuing to stroll slowly, a sweet fruity fragrance wafted over, and Chen Yang twitched his nose twice. Attracted by it. Looking to the side, I saw a stall selling peaches. Chen Yang's eyes lit up, and the canned yellow peaches he had eaten last night immediately came to his mind. He couldn't help but think of buying some peaches and asking his grandmother to can them. Star ripples. Chen Yang asked softly, "Do you want to buy anything?" Lin Xingyi shook her head, the smile in her eyes echoing the summer breeze. No. Chen Yang was already satisfied just taking her out for a ride. After hearing the answer behind him, Chen Yang planned to buy some peaches and go back. As he spoke, Chen Yang came to the stall and started to select carefully. His movements were gentle, fearing that the delicate fruits would be damaged. In the end, he selected 7 or 8 kilograms of peaches that looked the fullest. After returning home at lightning speed, Chen Yang excitedly showed the peach to his grandmother. "Grandma, I bought some peaches and I want you to make peaches for me." Grandma took the bag, looked at it carefully, and laughed. "Oh, I see you are silly. What you bought are crisp peaches. Not yellow peaches. This kind of peach cannot be canned." When Chen Yang heard this, he was stunned. He scratched his head and an embarrassed expression appeared on his face. The corners of my mouth twitched and I didn't know what to say. So embarrassing. When Lin Xingyi saw Chen Yang's embarrassment, her beautiful eyes curved into crescents and she couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her voice clear and pleasant, like a wind chime hanging at the door. Grandpa saw the tricycle and walked in from the yard. He looked at the peaches on the table, then at Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi. "The yellow peaches grown by your grandfather Huang should be almost ripe. Go pick them from his place." Normally these two old brothers would not refuse politely to each other. Chapter 66. Are your fingers delicious? Grandpa took out a touchscreen phone with an enlarged version of the text and application desktop on it. His fingers trembled slightly as he unlocked the phone with his fingerprint, opened the contact, and placed it close to his ear. "Hello? Old Wang?" There was some joy in Grandpa's voice. "It's like this. Yan Yang wants to go to your place to pick some yellow peaches." Grandpa Huang's hearty laughter came from the other end of the phone. "Okay, peaches are almost ready. Let Chen Yang get ready. I'll be there soon." After hanging up the phone, the grandfather smiled and turned to his grandson. "Chen Yang, get ready. Grandpa Huang will be here to take you there soon." Not long after, hurried footsteps were heard outside the door. Grandpa Huang pushed open the half-open gate and walked in. Although he is over 70 years old, he still walks very fast. "Where's the boy?" It was already very hot at 10 o'clock in the morning in summer. Grandpa Huang asked with a smile while wiping the sweat from his forehead. Chen Yang rushed out of the house upon hearing the voice. "Grandpa Huang, you came so quickly." The elderly always pay special attention to the younger generations, hoping that they will make some requests of them. That feeling of being needed and being able to do something for young people is like seeing the seeds of hope growing. With so many strangers around, Lin Xingyi became a little timid again. But she was much better than when she first arrived. Chen Yang turned around and said in a gentle tone, "Xingyi, you want to go too?" Lin Xingyi nodded, a faint blush on her face. Her eyes a little evasive. She didn't dare to look directly at Chen Yang's elder at such a close distance. Especially Chen Yang's grandmother would look at her from time to time. "Spray some floral water, there are many mosquitoes in the mountains." Having said that, Chen Yang turned around and ran into the house. Coming out with a bottle of toilet water. "Xingyi, close your eyes and raise your hands." Chen Yang said softly, his tone seemed to ask her to surrender. Lin Xingyi obediently closed her eyes and slowly raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, like a butterfly fluttering its wings among the flowers. So well behaved and cute. Chen Yang couldn't help but stop pouring the toilet water in his hand as he looked at her obedient appearance. She started spraying Lin Xingyi with floral water from head to toe. After all, mosquitoes can bite her, even through a thin piece of clothing. Slowly moving down, passing her white neck, then to her exposed arms and calçovist. Spray more heavily on areas not covered by clothes. There was a faint minty scent in the air, and Lin Xingyi's nose turned a little red because of the slightly stimulating smell. "Okay, you can open your eyes now," Chen Yang said as he sprayed himself. Lin Xingyi slowly opened her eyes and whispered thank you. There were other people around, so even when talking to Chen Yang, whom he was most familiar with, his voice unconsciously became lower. After spraying, Chen Yang handed the toilet water to Grandpa Huang. After everything was ready, Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi followed Grandpa Huang and set off for the mountains. The southeast is mountainous, but some of the flat land and gentle slopes in and around the mountains are good places for farming. The few of them walked slowly along the winding mountain road. The surrounding scenery gradually became lush and green, and the air was filled with the fresh scent of soil and grass. From time to time, the calls of several unknown pheasants could be heard in the woods. Finally, they turned into a small road and came to a valley. Several untidy rows of yellow peach trees come into view. with branches full of fruits, amidst the green leaves. We're here. Grandpa Huang grinned, and the wrinkles on his face piled up like a blooming chrysanthemum. I planted this when I had nothing to do. I didn't expect it to grow so well. Old people can't sit still, they always have to find something to do. Chen Yang rubbed his hands excitedly and rushed to the nearest tree impatiently. Stretch out your arms, stand on tiptoe, and try to reach the peaches that are high up. Lin Xingyi carefully picked the fruits at the lower parts, moving gently for fear of damaging the delicate yellow peaches. While picking, she thought about the method Chen Yang taught her. It looks edible, that's enough. The sunlight shone through the gaps in the leaves onto the two of them, casting mottled shadows on the ground. The breeze blows by, bringing bursts of fruity fragrance, which is refreshing. Chen Yang was picking peaches with great concentration, but the more he looked at them, the more he wanted to eat them. He swallowed and shouted to Lin Xingyi, who was not far away. Xingyi, I want to eat a peach, but my hands are not convenient. Could you please get me one and just wipe it on my clothes? Lin Xingyi hesitated for a moment after hearing this. She looked down at her own clothes, then at Chen Yang's clothes, and shook her head slightly. The clothes may not be very clean, he muttered softly. Then he pulled out a small pack of tissues from his pocket, and took out one with light movements. Wiping a yellow peach that looks good in the hand. Slender fingers gently rubbed the skin. After wiping, Lin Xingyi walked closer to Chen Yang, raised her head and looked at the hands that were busy working above her head. Chen Yang, she called softly, with a barely perceptible hesitation in her voice. I'll clean it for you. Chen Yang lowered his head slightly and saw Lin Xingyi holding a golden peach and handing it to him. The sunlight shone through the gaps in the leaves onto her face, casting a soft glow on her already fair skin. The beautiful fox eyes were slightly lowered, and the long eyelashes cast a small shadow on her face. Ah, thank you. Chen Yang grinned, revealing a row of white teeth, then raised his head and continued to work. He opened his mouth and motioned Lin Xingyi to feed him. Lin Xingyi suppressed her shyness, raised her hand a little higher, and brought the peach to Chen Yang's mouth. Really? I don't want to do it, but I want to eat. Chen Yang took a big bite without hesitation, and the juice flowed down the corners of his mouth. Halfway through biting, Chen Yang's expression suddenly became a little strange. He frowned and savored the taste in his mouth. This yellow peach tastes really tender, but it doesn't melt in your mouth as you might imagine. When I rolled it with my tongue, I felt a strange touch and even a hint of bitter mint. Strangeness. Chen Yang muttered to himself, picked up a large yellow peach that he had finally found above his head after struggling for a long time, and lowered his head in confusion. After withdrawing his attention, Chen Yang suddenly realized something. He bit Lin Xingyi's finger while eating. Chen Yang lowered his head slightly and saw Lin Xingyi looking at him with a look of disgust. Her cheeks were so red that they seemed to bleed, and her eyes were gleaming with surprise and a hint of indescribable emotion. Her hand did not move away, but remained in the air, with her fingertips trembling slightly. For a moment, both of them stood there in a daze, and the air was filled with awkwardness. The cicadas around were chirping particularly loudly, like audiences applauding enthusiastically. Chen Yang pretended to be calm and gave an embarrassed smile. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. He flicked the dust off his nose with his hands, which were a little dirty from work, trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. When Lin Xingyi saw Chen Yang looking at her, she lowered her head to hide her expression, her voice so low that it was almost inaudible. And never mind. At this moment, Grandpa Huang's call came from not far away, breaking the still air between the two. How much did you pick, little guys? Chen Yang woke up as if from a dream and quickly responded. There we go, Grandpa. Chapter 67 Learning Dialects. Chen Yang hurriedly and casually wiped his hands, took the peach from Lin Xingyi's hand, ate it in 2 or 3 bites, and then let the peach pit return to nature. There were already quite a few yellow peaches in the bamboo baskets that the two men brought. A layer of fine beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads, sparkling under the scorching sun. Grandpa Huang's kind voice came from not far away. It's almost time to go back, it will be too hot soon. Be careful on the road. Chen Yang stretched his muscles, and turned to look at Lin Xingyi. Lin Xingyi didn't care too much about what happened just now. She wiped the juice off her hands and carefully sorted the yellow peaches in the basket, fearing that even one would be damaged. The sunlight shone obliquely on the side of her face, casting a soft golden glow on her fair skin. Okay, Grandpa. Chen Yang came back to his senses and shouted to Grandpa Huang. What about you, won't you come back with us? Grandpa Huang waved his hand, and a kind smile appeared on the wrinkles on his face. You guys go back first, I'll be busy for a while. Just as Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi were about to leave, Grandpa Huang looked at the yellow peaches they were carrying and walked over quickly. Wait, Yang. Calling the two people who were about to turn around, Grandpa Huang walked to Chen Yang and 3 or 2 steps. carrying a simple cloth bag, which weighed at least 7 or 8 kilograms. "Here, take more," Grandpa Huang said with a smile. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes looked like blooming chrysanthemums. Chen Yang couldn't refuse, so he quickly stretched out his hands to take it. "Grandpa, isn't this too much?" He said this a little embarrassed lie. But he couldn't hide the joy on his face this way. Grandma could make a lot of canned yellow peaches. "Of course I will help too." Grandpa Huang laughed heartily and patted Chen Yang on the shoulder. Not much, you young people are growing up. So it's better to eat more fruits." Chen Yang took the heavy cloth bag, his heart full of gratitude. He looked at Lin Xingyi, who was waiting for him to lead the way, and thought of something. His eyes rolled, and a mischievous smirk appeared at the corners of his mouth. "Grandpa, Mr. Ruin has left first." Chen Yang spoke in fluent dialect, his voice loud and a bit playful. The general meaning is, "Grandpa, let's go back first." Because Lin Xingyi was around, Chen Yang tried to communicate in Mandarin as much as possible, for fear that she would not understand and would not feel involved. Grandpa Huang didn't think there was anything wrong with it, as Cantonese was the language mostly used in the village. Okay, go back quickly and don't let your grandfather worry." Lin Xingyi blinked her big eyes, although she didn't quite understand what was said. She roughly knew that it was a goodbye. "I have to say goodbye myself." After hesitating for a moment, a timid voice sounded, with a soft tone. Grandpa, Ruin wants to turn around." This is what Chen Yang wanted to hear, and Lin Xingyi really followed suit. Lin Xingyi was seen mustering up her courage and trying hard to imitate Chen Yang's tone and speak in dialect. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and she was obviously concentrating on recalling the pronunciation she had just heard. His eyes were wide open, and anticipation and nervousness flickered in his black and white pupils. The small nose wrinkled slightly, and the rosy lips trembled slightly, brewing the next syllable. "This sentence is not quite standard, but I can still understand it." The dialect pronunciation, which is already relatively mellow, coupled with Lin Xingyi's pleasant voice, sounds soft and sticky, just like the glutinous rice balls just out of the pot, round and with a hint of sweetness. She pronounced Ruan as Guanchu. Chen Yang couldn't suppress the smile. He was a little touched by Lin Xingyi's cuteness. He covered his mouth with his hands and pretended to cough to cover it up. His eyes curved into crescent shapes, his sharp eyebrows twisted together as he tried to hold back his smile. Grandpa Huang smiled kindly when he heard it, his eyes full of doting. Okay, little girl, you are so good, walk slowly and be careful on the road." Lin Xingyi also knew that what she said was not standard, but she did not regret it. Her little face turned pink. She lowered her head, and her long eyelashes trembled slightly. She secretly glanced at Chen Yang, and found that he was looking at her while trying not to laugh. "Let's go." Chen Yang tried his best to be serious, with a hint of tenderness in his tone. "It is really a pleasure to let someone who can't speak dialect, accompanied by Lin Xingyi's soft tone. He picked up the cloth bag full of yellow peaches in one hand and picked up his bamboo basket with the other. Lin Xingyi didn't quite remember the way back, so she followed Chen Yang and found that he was always smiling. Although he didn't make any sound, the corners of his mouth were always raised. Lin Xingyi tried hard to erase the shyness she felt when she was learning to speak in dialect. "Why are you laughing?" "I remembered something happy," Chen Yang said cheerfully. "Later, I simply taught her how to say 'what are you laughing at' in dialect." Lin Xingyi curled her lips and refused. "No, I won't tell you." The two returned home and Chen Yang showed his harvest to his grandmother. "Oh, it looks good," Grandma said happily, gently stroking the golden and plump fruits with her rough hands. She had been prepared, and all the tools and materials in the kitchen were neatly arranged. She tied her apron skillfully and greeted the two young men. "Come on, let's get started." Chen Yang rolled up his sleeves swiftly, stood at the sink and began to wash the yellow peaches. The movements were brisk and powerful, and the water splashed with tiny sparkles in the sun. Lin Xingyi brought a small stool and sat quietly beside it, watching carefully with eyes wide open. Grandma stood in front of the stove, filled a large pot with water, then put in an appropriate amount of white sugar and stirred it gently. The sugar grains slowly dissolved in the water, like stars falling into a lake. The ratio of sugar to water is very important. If it is too sweet, it will cover the fragrance of the yellow peach, while if it is too light, it will appear bland. Lin Xingyi watched intently and nodded slightly unconsciously. Her brows sometimes relaxed and sometimes slightly frowned, as if she was trying to learn something from someone. His fingers tapped unconsciously on his knees, as if he was silently calculating the ratio of sugar to water. Chen Yang handed the washed yellow peach to his grandmother, who skillfully used a knife to cut across at the bottom of the peach to make it easier to peel. When cutting into petals, one petal of the 5-petal yellow peach will be lost when it passes through Chen Yang's hands. Wash and cut it, it would be a shame not to eat it. Sometimes he would feed a petal to Lin Xingyi, who was sitting next to him. Grandma puts the processed yellow peaches into the boiling sugar water and gently stirs them. The golden peach flesh floats in the clear sugar water. Chen Yang stood by, helping to pass tools or adjust the heat from time to time. Lin Xingyi's little head nodded and shook gently from time to time, silently praising this skill she had never seen before. After finishing the work, jars of crystal clear yellow peaches were placed on the table. The sunlight shining through the glass jars made the golden peach flesh even more tempting. Lin Xingyi looked at these cans, the curiosity in her eyes had almost disappeared, and she patted her head gently, as if her brain had learned everything. Grandma stood aside, looking at the two young people, and said softly, "Okay, the cans need to sit for a while, and we can seal them after they cool down." It was past 10 in the morning, and despite all the commotion, Xiao Han didn't come over to join in the fun. He must still be sleeping. Chapter 68, Amulet. Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi have lived in Taiking for almost a week, and it is almost time to leave. Time flies, and in the blink of an eye, Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi's time in the countryside is coming to an end. In the evening before leaving, the golden sunset enveloped the entire village in a gentle halo. Grandma was carrying a red basket and called out to the three younger generations. Xiao Han, Chen Yang, and Lin Xingyi. Let's go to the big temple and pray for your safety and well-being." The four of them walked slowly along the not-so-wide road in the village towards the big temple at the entrance of the village. In the twilight, the ancient temple stands tall, and the vermilion or pillars sparkle in the setting sun. The copper bells on the eaves swayed in the wind, making clear and pleasant sounds, as if the gods were waving to them. As you walk into the temple, the rich scent of sandalwood hits you in the face. The candlelight danced on the statues of Buddha and the city god, adding a sense of mystery to their solemn faces that were not easily seen clearly. Chen Yang is more casual, he has done this many times since he was a child. Lin Xingyi grabbed the corner of Chen Yang's clothes, a little nervously, with a hint of inexplicable awe and curiosity in her eyes. As the older cousin, Xiao Han also looked calm and was as familiar with this place as Chen Yang. He would steal glances at Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi from time to time, with a meaningful smirk on his face. Grandma took out 3 red candles from the red basket, held them in both hands, and lit them respectfully. The flickering candlelight all around illuminated her wrinkled but kind face. Then he took out 4 long and thin incense sticks, and gave one to each person. Then Grandma started mumbling, probably saying something like, "I hope you're safe." Anyway, Chen Yang has never been able to hear clearly what is being said since he was a child. Lin Xingyi's focus look next to him made Chen Yang couldn't help laughing. But in this kind of situation, we should try to remain serious. Xiao Han seemed to know this mysterious blessing spell as well. He recited it in a low voice, and after finishing it, he continued to look at the 2 young men beside him with interest. After burning incense, Grandma brought the 3 children to the incineration furnace outside the temple gate, took out several stacks of gold and silver paper, held them in both hands, and chanted. After saying this, he put gold and silver paper into the brazier one by one. The flames instantly rose up, turning the blessings into wisps of green smoke that curled up. Lin Xingyi moved closer curiously, and was startled by the sudden burst of flames. She subconsciously hid behind Chen Yang, causing Xiao Han to cover her mouth and chuckle. After doing all this, Grandma took out 3 big red envelopes, scooped out 3 bags of incense ash from the incense burning place in the temple, and put them into the red envelopes respectively. As night fell, the temple looked even more mysterious under the starlight. The 4 people slowly walked out of the temple gate. The moonlight was like water, illuminating their way home. The dim light and poor visibility just concealed the girl's immaturity. Lin Xingyi became a little bolder, and just like when they were alone, she hesitated and lightly touched Chen Yang's hand. Chen Yang enjoyed the soft touch in his hands and did not refuse. He secretly glanced at Lin Xingyi beside him. The girl's profile looked particularly gentle. Noticing that her grandmother was looking over here, Lin Xingyi quickly withdrew her hand. "Here, one for each of you." Grandma gave 3 red envelopes filled with incense ash to the 3 younger generations. "Keep it safe, don't lose it." Chen Yang is quite familiar with it, as this session occurs every time he comes back. Lin Xingyi received this kind of thing for the first time. She tightened the red envelope in her hand, as if it was more than just a lucky charm. She said in a sweet voice, "Thank you, Grandma." Xiao Han also got one and walked behind, looking at his cousin and his patient, a rather strange combination. He sighed softly and murmured to himself. The next morning, the time of parting finally arrived. Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi's luggage had been packed and placed in the yard, quietly waiting for their owners. The big wolf dog Da Huang was sticking out his tongue and circling around Chen Yang. Several people came to see him off. Grandpa Huang stood with his hands behind his back, and the wrinkles on his face were filled with kindness. Grandpa and Grandma stood by. The reluctance in their eyes was beyond words. My cousin Xiao Han was leaning on the door frame not far away. With a faint smile on her lips, she would probably have to leave soon. Grandpa Huang walked up to Chen Yang and Lin Xingyi, took out to read envelopes from his pocket, and handed them to the two young men with trembling hands. Yang, little girl, this is a little gift from Grandpa. Study hard, be safe and happy. If it is a relative you don't see often, you should be polite, but it is not necessary to be polite to someone you are very close to. Lin Xingyi was a little at a loss, not knowing whether to take it or not. Chen Yang took the two read envelopes with both hands and stuffed one into Lin Xingyi's arms. Thank you, Grandpa. Lin Xingyi had no choice but to take it and said thank you like Chen Yang did. Hearing Grandpa Huang say study hard is very different from hearing my mother say it. There is no feeling of disgust or resistance. Maybe there is another sentence behind it. Peace and happiness, and this sentence is the key point. Grandpa and Grandma also came forward and took out the prepared red envelopes from the pockets on the inside of their lapels. Grandma wiped her hands on her clothes before handing the red envelopes to the two children. Yang, take care of yourself. Grandma whined softly, her voice full of reluctance, and then said, You too. Little girl, you should eat more and stop being too skinny. This sentence seems to have another meaning. Lin Xingyi followed Chen Yang's example and did not refuse. She took the red envelope, nodded and expressed her gratitude. Just then, Xiao Qinghan walked over from the door lightly with a hint of mischief in his eyes. She reached out and grabbed Chen Yang's sleeve, pulling gently. Hey Yang, come here for a moment. Chen Yang looked confused, but still followed his cousin to the corner of the yard. Xiao Qinghan's long hair shone with a soft luster in the sunlight. She tilted her head and revealed a playful smile. My red envelope. Xiao Qinghan lowered his voice and glanced inadvertently in the direction of Lin Xingyi. I don't have money now, I'll give it to you if you two are really together. But you really have to think it over carefully. Her tone was filled with helplessness and worry, but also a hint of teasing. It's not that Xiao Qinghan didn't want to give it. He just didn't bring any cash, so he couldn't put it in a red envelope, and sending it on WeChat wouldn't have that meaning. Chen Yang was stunned at first, and scratched the back of his head. Hey, cousin, where is my brother-in-law? Before he could finish his words, Chen Yang suddenly felt a pain on the top of his head. It turned out that Xiao Qinghan raised his hand and gave him a slap on the head with his knuckles. Stinky boy. Xiao Qinghan pretended to be angry, but there was a smile in his eyes. I think you are reaching for trouble. Chen Yang rubbed the place where he was hit, with an exaggerated expression of grievance on his face. Oh, my cousin, you're really harsh. Then he grinned again, showing his white teeth. But seriously, cousin, you should find a boyfriend. When you find it, I'll give you a big red envelope. Upon hearing this, Xiao Qinghan raised his hand as if to hit again. The two of them chased each other and made a little noise in the yard, which made everyone else laugh. Lin Xingyi stood aside, watching the two people playing, with a look of envy on her fair little face. But her eyes always followed Chen Yang, and a sweet smile unconsciously appeared on the corner of her mouth. After the commotion, Xiao Qinghan tidied up her messy hair and gently patted Chen Yang's shoulder. Well, go back quickly, don't get home too late. Her voice softened, regaining some of the care and concern of an older sister. Chen Yang nodded and walked towards Lin Xingyi. He reached out to pick up the luggage and put it in the trunk of the white Volkswagen, took a deep breath, and turned to face the relatives who were seeing him off. Grandpa, Grandma, Grandpa Huang, let's go. Chen Yang's voice was loud, but trembling a little. Thank you for your care. We will definitely come back to see you often. Chapter 16 Sign, a brief separation. This time, Chen Yang did not stop on the way and drove back to Linjiang in one breath. The afterglow of the setting sun dyed the sky red. A white Volkswagen with license plate number John 827,138 drove off the highway and into Linjiang City. Inside the car, Lin Xingyi sat quietly in the passenger seat, fiddling with the corners of her clothes with her slender fingers from time to time, showing a bit of uneasiness after getting off the highway. I feel a little unhappy inside. Now that I'm back, do I have to say goodbye to Chen Yang for a while? Arrive. Chen Yang said softly, and parked the car in front of Linjiang University. Getting out of the car through the left door was right in the residential area where Lin Xingyi's regal house was located. They got out of the car together, and Chen Yang helped her take out her luggage. The cool evening breeze blows across my face, but I still feel hot. Chen Yang got out of the car and stretched. Finally, I'm back. It's been a long journey. After driving on the highway twice, Chen Yang has become disenchanted with this thing. It is really tiring to drive for so long. I no longer have the passion I had when I first got my driver's license less than 12 months ago and was looking forward to driving on the highway. Lin Xingyi nodded slightly, but her eyes never left the ground. Chen Yang noticed that she was in a low mood and couldn't help but frown. Star ripples. Chen Yang called out softly, with some concern in his tone. I know you probably don't want to be alone, but he scratched his head and continued a little embarrassed lie. It's summer vacation now, and I can't be with you every day. Lin Xingyi was touched by what he said. She raised her head and forced a smile, her voice sounding a little aggrieved. It's okay. Last time, I abruptly expressed to Chen Yang that I wanted to live together and was rejected, so I should have expected this to happen during the long vacation. Chen Yang was still a little conflicted. But when I took her back to the countryside, I stayed with her every day for a week, so that made up for it. Having me always by her side doesn't help her take the initiative to interact with the world. Before leaving, Chen Yang's expression became serious. He looked directly into the girl's eyes and said seriously, "Promise me you'll try not to go home, okay?" Lin Xingyi's body trembled slightly. And she knew what Chen Yang meant. Chen Yang had clearly told herself that that was the source of her depression, and she should not go back if she could avoid it. After that, Chen Yang added, "If you really have to go back for something, be sure to call me first. I will answer the phone at any time." Lin Xingyi replied in a low voice, "Yes, I will." Chen Yang touched his nose, paused, and added, "If you feel lonely you can call me and chat. Although I may not be with you, my ears are always ready for you." Lin Xingyi felt a little less disappointed. Yeah, I see." The two stood facing each other and fell into silence for a while. As night fell, the street lights lit up one by one. Then, "I'll go first." Chen Yang broke the silence and waved to Lin Xingyi. "Remember to eat well and take good care of yourself." Lin Xingyi nodded. "You too, doctor, carefully. The places where they live are not far from each other, and it only takes about 40 minutes to get there by subway." However, Chen Yang still had his own things to do when Lin Xingyi was by his side. Her alluring fragrance and beautiful figure always distracted him. Chen Yang got into the car, and as the engine started up slightly, he stuck his head out. "Then I'm really leaving, bye." Lin Xingyi dragged her suitcase and slowly walked into the apartment building. Chen Yang drove to the corner and watched Lin Xingyi's back disappear before driving away. The oil level is a little low. Chen Yang glanced at the dashboard and muttered to himself, "Looks like I need to go get some gas." Drive to the nearest gas station with ease. As the night deepens, street lights on both sides of the street light up one after another, casting a soft halo on the city. "Welcome." The gas station staff greeted us warmly. Chen Yang watched the number jump to 40 liters and paid 312, thinking that he would have to ask his father to reimburse him for this money. With the click sound of the gas pump, Chen Yang couldn't help but think of the scene when he parted with Lin Xingyi just now. He sighed softly, silently praying that she could take good care of herself. After filling up to 80, Chen Yang drove back home, driving a white Volkswagen, traveling briskly through the city streets. The cars and car music was playing cheerful pop songs, and Chen Yang couldn't help but humming along. A white Volkswagen drove into a waiting garden in the community under the light of street lights. And Chen Yang also arrived home. Anping Garden was built in the early 1990s. It was a residential area planned by Linjiang City for a group of government workers and veterans. With the development of the times, some commercial housing was also built. Chen Yang's home is a duplex house on the 7th and 8th floors of Building No. 3, with an indoor staircase connecting the upper and lower floors. Downstairs are the living room and dining room, and upstairs are the bedrooms and study. This is the house that Chen Yang's grandfather Chen Jian left for Chen Jianjin to get married. Although it is a bit simple, its design is better than that of ordinary houses. Chen Yang parked the car into his own parking space skillfully, his movements smooth and fluid. When getting off the car, Chen Yang stretched himself and looked up at the moon, which was not yet very obvious in the sky. He took out a bulging plastic bag from the trunk and walked briskly towards home. In the elevator, Chen Yang hummed the song that had just been playing in the car, and his toes unconsciously tapped to the rhythm. With a ding sound, the elevator door opened and Chen Yang ran to his door into steps. When Chen Yang entered the door, the clock was already past 6:30. "I'm back," Chen Yang shouted as he opened the door, a sunny smile on his face. In the living room, Chen Jianjin was sitting on the sofa watching the evening news and caring about the international situation, while Chen's mother Li Huowan was busy in the kitchen. Hearing Chen Yang's voice, they both raised their heads at the same time. "Oh, you're off work so early today?" Chen Yang asked in surprise while changing his shoes. "Dad, it's rare to see you come home so early." Chen Jianjun smiled and shook his head. "There's not much to do in the bureau today, so let's go early." Chen Yang took 3 or 2 steps to the coffee table and casually placed the plastic bag in his hand on it. Right," Chen Yang suddenly seemed to remember something. "I brought you some local specialties." Mother Chen poked her head out from the kitchen. "What's the specialty?" "Nothing," Chen Yang replied with a smile. Chen Yang placed the 7 or 8 kilograms of crisp peaches he had bought by mistake on the coffee table. His grandparents didn't like to eat them, so Chen Yang had to take them back. "Otherwise my grandparents would force me to finish it in order to not waste food." Chen Jianjun put down the remote control and opened the plastic bag with interest. Let me try it. Chen Yang watched his father eating fruit and wondered if he had noticed that 2 bottles of wine were missing. I couldn't help swallowing when I smelled the aroma coming from the kitchen. Mom, what are we having for dinner tonight? It smells so good. Chen Yang shouted towards the kitchen. Braised spiribus. Li Huowan said with a smile in her voice. Go wash your hands. You can eat soon. Chapter 70, Girls' Thoughts. In the next few weeks, Chen Yang stayed at home almost all the time, working on the router in front of his computer. In Chen Yang's room, the heavy curtains were closed, blocking out the scorching summer sun. Call. Chen Yang let out a long sigh and rubbed his sore eyes. As the research on campus network multi-device detection deepened, Chen Yang found while searching for information online that seniors from other universities had also made some efforts to achieve economical benefits and shared some experiences. In the corner next to him, several thick computer books were piled up like a small mountain. He reached out and grabbed the top one, flipping through it quickly. Damn, what's said here is a little different from that post online. He muttered to himself, his brows furrowed. Suddenly, the sound of a cell phone interrupted his thoughts. Chen Yang grabbed his phone reflexively, afraid of missing any message from Lin Xingyi. He told Lin Xingyi that she could contact him anytime if she had any problems. And he kept his cell phone open and placed next to her. The screen displayed a normal weather forecast. Scared to death, Chen Yang opened the chat interface with Lin Xingyi. The latest message he sent was 3 days ago. Remember to take your medicine on time. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Below is Lin Xingyi's simple reply. Since it was summer vacation, they didn't eat in the cafeteria. So the two of them hadn't eaten together at noon since the vacation. Chen Yang's slender fingers hesitated on the keyboard for a moment, but still did not send any new messages. Lin Xingyi didn't look for me, so there shouldn't be any problem. This thought comforted Chen Yang a little, but then he felt a little guilty. In the weeks after returning from the countryside, he devoted almost all his energy to this research, and his concern for Lin Xingyi seemed a bit perfunctory. Gurgle. A loud stomach growl interrupted Chen Yang's thoughts, and he realized that he hadn't eaten for the whole day. Since Chen Yang could cook by himself, his parents didn't worry about him and didn't pay much attention to him. Chen Yang stood up, stretched his body, and moved his 10 fingers one by one. He felt all the bones in his body crackling. I went to the kitchen to find food, opened the cupboard, and saw a row of instant noodles neatly arranged inside. Spicy and sour are braised today, Chen Yang talked to himself, as if this was a major decision worthy of serious consideration. Finally, he grabbed a bucket of classic braised beef noodles, expertly brought it to a boil, and poured in hot water. 3 minutes later, the fragrant instant noodles appeared in front of me. I wolfed down half of my meal as if it were the most delicious thing in the world. At this moment, there was a sound of a key turning outside the door. Oh no, why are you here so early today? Chen Yang was startled, and almost knocked over the instant noodles. He looked around in panic. Like a caught thief, he poured the instant noodles into the toilet at lightning speed and flushed it hard. Then he quickly stuffed the instant noodle bucket into the garbage bag and tied it tightly. Finally he grabbed the air freshener, and sprayed it frantically in the kitchen and bathroom. It's not that my parents don't allow me to eat, I just don't want to listen to my mother's nagging for maybe half an hour. What about not eating too much when you are growing up? And not being able to finish dinner, is because you ate too much junk food. Yang, I'm back. My mother's voice came from the living room. Here it comes. While responding, Chen Yang quickly tidied up his messy hair and clothes, making himself look like he had just finished his work, and walked out of the room as if nothing had happened. Mom, why are you back so early today? Chen Yang asked in a nonchalant tone, but his heart was beating fast. The mother smiled and said, I got off work early today, thinking that since I can come back early, I will cook a good dinner. By the way, what did you have for lunch today? Chen Yang's heart skipped a beat. I hadn't eaten anything for lunch today. He thought he wasn't too hungry anyway, but he remained calm. Oh, I just made something myself. I prayed silently that my mother wouldn't ask for details. Fortunately, Li Huowan didn't seem to be suspicious. Chen Yang breathed a sigh of relief and thought to himself that he must have a good meal tonight to make up for the malnutrition during this period. Back in the room, Chen Yang's attention was once again attracted by the unfinished content on the computer. At the same time, on the other side of Linjiang City, Lin Xingyi's summer vacation was passing quietly. The setting sun shone through the gauze curtains, casting a hazy glow in Lin Xingyi's room. The girl sat on the bed, then on the sofa holding a mobile phone in her hand, with a chat interface with Chen Yang displayed on the screen. The latest message was the reply to Chen Yang 3 days ago. Lin Xingyi pouted her lips slightly and looked at the screen, her fingers hovering hesitantly over the keyboard, occasionally typing a few words quickly, and then quickly deleting them all. Her brows were slightly furrowed, and the corners of her mouth were unconsciously pursed into a thin line. What should I say? Lin Xingyi murmured to herself. I miss you so much, that's too corny. Today's weather is so nice. And so embarrassing. She sighed softly and finally put down her phone. Chen Yang must be very busy, she said to herself. Don't bother him. Just then, the phone suddenly vibrated. Lin Xingyi's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, but when she saw the caller ID, that hint of anticipation instantly turned into heaviness. Mother, she took a deep breath, forced herself to calm down, and then answered the phone. Xingyi, my mother's voice came from the receiver. When are you coming home? Come back for dinner. The woman's voice was questioning, and even strangely tender. According to the past, he would definitely agree. Lin Xingyi closed her eyes and tried